It was a hot and dusty afternoon in a small Texas valley. The land was dry and the wind carried the smell of earth and hay. Samuel, a poor farmer, worked slowly under the sun. His clothes were worn and his boots were cracked, but he kept working because that was all he knew. Life had not been kind to him, yet his heart was gentle. He believed in helping others even when he himself had little. His small farmhouse stood at the edge of his dying field, surrounded by a few tired cows and a broken fence. That afternoon, as he lifted his head to wipe his sweat, he heard something unusual, a loud noise coming from the hills. It sounded like hooves striking hard ground. Then came the faint echo of gunshots. Samuel froze, his heart thumping. He squinted his eyes toward the distant road and saw a man running wildly toward his farm. Dust followed him like a storm cloud. Behind him, 3 riders on horses chased fast, shouting angrily. The man looked frightened and exhausted, his clothes dusty but fine, not the kind worn by local farmers. Without thinking twice, Samuel ran toward his barn. The man reached the gate, gasping for air. "Please," he begged, "they're after me." Samuel didn't ask questions. He opened the barn door quickly and motioned for the stranger to get inside. The man stumbled in, nearly falling, and Samuel pushed a few hay bales in front of the door to hide him. Moments later, the 3 bandits arrived, their horses kicking up dirt. One of them shouted, "Old man! Have you seen anyone come this way?" Samuel stood near his porch, trying to keep calm. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "No," he said, "I've been working in the field all day. Haven't seen a soul." The bandits looked around suspiciously. One of them got off his horse and walked toward the barn. Samuel's heart pounded hard, but he kept his face plain. The man kicked the barn door but didn't open it. After a long pause, the leader finally said, "Let's go. He's too poor to lie for anyone." They turned their horses and rode off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and tension. Samuel waited until the sound of hooves disappeared. Then he hurried to the barn and moved the hay aside. The stranger crawled out, breathing heavily. His shirt was torn and his face was pale. "Thank you," he said, his voice weak but full of emotion. "You just saved my life." Samuel handed him a cup of water from a wooden bucket. "Sit down," he said gently. "You're safe now." The man drank slowly, trying to catch his breath. He introduced himself as Mr. Thomas. He said he had been traveling through the area when a group of bandits attacked his carriage. He ran when they tried to rob him, not knowing where to go. "If not for you," he said quietly, "I don't know what would have happened." Samuel didn't speak much. He was not a man of many words. He brought out some bread and a piece of cheese from his small kitchen. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll help." Thomas looked at the simple meal with watery eyes. "You're sharing your food with me even when you have so little." Samuel smiled faintly. Food means nothing if you can't share it when someone's hungry. As evening came, the sky turned orange and gold. They sat near the small oil lamp in Samuel's kitchen. The soft light flickered on the wooden walls. The air was quiet except for the chirping of crickets outside. Thomas asked, "Why did you risk your life for me? You didn't even know who I was." Samuel looked up slowly and replied, "When a man's in trouble, you don't ask who he is. You just help." Thomas was silent for a while. He had met many people in life, but none like this farmer. Poor in wealth, yet rich in heart. The 2 men talked a little more. Thomas told him about traveling to different towns and how dangerous the roads had become. Samuel spoke about his farm, his debts, and how he was trying to hold on to hope even when the land refused to grow. That night, Samuel offered him a bed made of straw in the barn. "You can rest here. No one will find you." Thomas thanked him again and lay down, staring at the wooden roof above. He could not sleep easily. His thoughts were heavy with the kindness he had just received from a stranger who had nothing to gain. Before sunrise, Samuel woke up early as usual. He went outside to milk the cows and prepare for another hard day. When he walked back toward the barn, he saw Thomas already awake, standing near his horse. The stranger looked calmer now, his clothes cleaned as best as he could manage. "I'll be leaving now," Thomas said softly. "You've done more for me than I can ever repay." Samuel shook his head. "There's no need to repay kindness. Just help someone else when you can." Thomas smiled, but there was emotion in his eyes. He took Samuel's rough hand in both of his and said, "You've given me something more than safety. You've given me faith in people again." He climbed onto his horse, turned toward the rising sun, and rode away down the dusty road. Samuel stood there watching until the figure disappeared into the hills. Then he turned back to his quiet little home. The days that followed were hard. Samuel went back to his routine, working in the fields, fixing fences, and struggling to keep his small farm alive. The heat was harsh, and sometimes he wondered how long he could hold on. But every evening, when the sky turned red and the world grew still, his mind went back to that moment, the desperate man running toward him, the sound of hooves, and the look of gratitude in the stranger's eyes. He often wondered where that man was now. Had he found safety? Was he alive and well? Sometimes Samuel felt a strange comfort thinking about it. He didn't expect anything to come from it. He just hoped the man was safe. One evening, as he sat by his window watching the fading light, Samuel whispered to himself, maybe that's what life is all about, helping someone when they need it most. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to change his life forever. But for now, he remained unaware, living his humble life on the edge of a silent valley, with faith that good deeds always find their way home. And so, the poor farmer slept that night under the soft glow of the moon, unaware that his story had just begun. 3 days passed after the night Samuel helped the stranger. The sun had risen again over the valley, casting the same golden light on his small, tired farm. Samuel was working quietly near the barn, mending a fence post that had broken in the wind. Life had gone back to its usual rhythm, slow, hard, and silent. The memory of the man he saved was still fresh in his mind, but he never thought he would see him again. To Samuel, that chapter felt closed. That morning, while he was feeding his cows, Samuel suddenly heard a sound that didn't belong in his valley. It wasn't the sound of horses this time. It was a deep humming noise, strange and mechanical. He turned around, wiping his hands on his dusty trousers, and saw a black car driving slowly down the dirt road toward his farmhouse. It was shiny, unlike anything Samuel had ever owned or even touched. Cars were rare in this part of the country. Samuel's first thought was fear. Maybe the bandits had returned in another form, maybe looking for the man he had hidden. He felt uneasy but stood his ground as the car came closer and stopped near his gate. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. One was tall and wore a hat that gleamed in the sunlight. The other carried a leather briefcase. They looked completely out of place against the backdrop of Samuel's worn-down house and cracked earth. The tall man walked toward him with a smile. "Mr. Samuel?" he asked politely. Samuel nodded, still unsure. "Yes, that's me," he replied cautiously. The man removed his hat. For a second, Samuel's eyes widened. It was the same man he had saved, the stranger from the barn, but now dressed in fine clothes and looking confident and healthy. He smiled warmly. "You may not recognize me right away," he said, "but I'm the man you helped a few nights ago, Thomas." Samuel blinked in disbelief. The man looked so different, clean, well-dressed, calm. His horse had been replaced by a luxury car. For a moment, Samuel didn't know what to say. "Mr. Thomas," he finally whispered. "You came back." Thomas laughed softly. "I promised I would." They shook hands firmly. Samuel could feel the strength in Thomas's grip, but more than that, he could sense the genuine gratitude. "You risked your life for me," Thomas said. "I could never forget that. You didn't ask who I was, you didn't hesitate. You just helped." Samuel smiled humbly. "Any man would have done the same." Thomas shook his head. "No, Samuel, not everyone would. I've lived long enough to know that kindness like yours is rare." He turned to his driver, who opened the car door and brought out the leather briefcase. Thomas took it and motioned for Samuel to follow him inside the small farmhouse. Samuel led him in, still confused but curious. The kitchen looked the same as before, simple wooden table, an oil lamp, and 2 chairs. Thomas looked around, remembering the night he had sat there, scared and half-starved. "You offered me food when you had almost none," Thomas said softly. "You gave me safety when I had nowhere to go. I came here today to keep my promise." Samuel frowned slightly. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't do it for a reward." Thomas smiled kindly. "I know you didn't. That's exactly why you deserve one." He opened the briefcase, revealing a set of official papers, neatly folded and stamped. He placed them on the table. Samuel looked down, trying to understand. "What's this?" he asked. Thomas sat down and began to explain. "I'm not just a traveler, Samuel. I own a large ranch, a very large one. Thousands of acres of fertile land, cattle, and workers. The bandits that attacked me that night were trying to rob me and take my property documents. You saved me from losing everything, even my life." Samuel was speechless. He looked from Thomas to the papers again. The thought that the man he had hidden in his barn was actually a wealthy landowner seemed impossible. Thomas continued, "These are the transfer papers. This ranch, one of my biggest, will now belong to you. It's fully legal and signed. From this day forward, you are the owner." Samuel's mouth fell open. He couldn't find his voice. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the edges of the paper. "Sir, I can't accept this. I didn't help you for money or land." Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know, my friend. But you gave me something more valuable than money. You gave me faith. You showed me that good men still exist. This is not charity, it's gratitude. You saved my life, and now I want to help you live yours in peace." For a long moment, Samuel stood silent. Tears filled his eyes, though he tried to hide them. "I don't know what to say," he whispered finally. Thomas smiled. "Then say nothing. Just live well." They both stepped outside as the car driver prepared to leave. "Come with me," Thomas said. "I want you to see the place with your own eyes." Samuel hesitated, still unsure if it was real, but Thomas insisted. Within an hour, they reached a vast open field bordered by green hills and shining rivers. Samuel's eyes widened as he saw the land stretch endlessly in every direction. There were rows of healthy crops, herds of cattle grazing, and workers moving about. The air was fresh and the soil looked rich and alive, the opposite of his dry, cracked farm. "This is all yours now," Thomas said gently. "You can live here, grow your crops, or let my workers help you manage it. The house on the hill will be prepared for you. You won't have to worry about debts or hunger ever again." Samuel walked slowly across the field, touching the tall grass as the wind brushed against his face. It felt unreal, like a dream he never dared to dream. His heart was full of emotions he couldn't name: gratitude, disbelief, and quiet joy. He turned to Thomas and said softly, "I only did what felt right that day." "I didn't know it would come back to me like this." Thomas nodded. "Goodness has a way of finding its way home, Samuel. Sometimes it takes time, but it always returns." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunlight dance over the land. Thomas then handed him a small key. "This belongs to your new home," he said. Samuel took it with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I will never forget this." Thomas smiled one last time. "It's I who will never forget you." When the car drove away, Samuel stayed behind, standing on the hill overlooking the vast ranch that was now his. The sky was wide and blue, and the wind carried the sound of distant cattle. For the first time in years, Samuel felt peace settle inside his chest. He knelt down, ran his fingers through the soft green grass, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for sending that man to my door." That night, Samuel slept in his new home, a large but warm ranch house with strong walls and the smell of wood and earth. As he lay in bed, he thought about how life could change with one simple act of kindness. He remembered the moment he opened his barn to a stranger, and realized that was the turning point of everything. From that day forward, Samuel became known as the farmer with the golden heart. People from nearby towns would come to visit him, often hearing the story of how a poor man once saved a stranger, who turned out to be one of the richest ranch owners in the nation. But Samuel never bragged or showed pride. Whenever someone asked him how it happened, he would simply smile and say, "Help someone when they need it." You never know how far that help might travel. Years later, even when Samuel grew old, he often stood at the same spot overlooking his green fields, remembering the dusty road, the frightened man, and the power of one small decision made in kindness. He knew then that true wealth wasn't in land or cattle. It was in the goodness that lives inside the human heart. And so, the poor farmer who once struggled to survive ended up living a life full of peace, not because he sought riches, but because he chose compassion. His story became a gentle reminder to everyone who heard it, that kindness, no matter how small, can change the course of a life forever.